2 million years ago, on the open grasslands of equatorial East Africa, a small, upright figure is walking in the full heat of midday sun. Every other large mammal nearby has retreated into shade. It keeps walking. No fur is protecting its skin. No hat, no shirt, nothing. And it will keep walking like this for hours, chasing prey that any other predator would have given up on hours ago, under a sun that today would leave most bodies red and blistered within an afternoon. So why didn't it burn? For most of human history, skin wasn't a fragile thing that needed to be protected from the sun. It was a piece of engineered survival equipment, built by natural selection to solve a very different problem than sunburn. And the fact that it also happened to prevent burning was almost a side effect. Chapter 1 starts at the moment the fur disappeared. Around 1 to 2 million years ago, early members of the genus Homo, likely Homo erectus, began losing their body hair. Nina Jablonski, professor of anthropology at Pennsylvania State University, has spent decades reconstructing why. Her research points to Turkana boy, a nearly 1.6 million-year-old Homo erectus fossil found near Kenya's Lake Turkana, whose skeleton was built for endurance, long legs, a narrow pelvis, a body shaped for covering huge distances on foot in open, hot terrain. That kind of movement generates enormous internal heat. A thick coat of fur, useful for a forest-dwelling ape, becomes a liability on a savanna hunt. So the fur thinned out, and in its place came something new. Several million eccrine sweat glands spread across bare skin, turning the entire body into a radiator. But here's the problem nobody solved yet. Strip away the fur, and now bare skin is sitting directly under equatorial UV radiation. All day, every day. Something else had to change to make that survivable. This is where most modern assumptions get it backward. Chapter 2 is where the popular explanation gets eliminated. The instinctive guess is that dark skin evolved as sunscreen, protection against sunburn, and eventually skin cancer. It's a tidy explanation, and for most of the 20th century, most researchers believed it. But according to Jablonski and her longtime collaborator George Chaplin, senior research associate at Penn State, the sunburn theory doesn't actually hold up under evolutionary scrutiny. Sunburn is painful, but it almost never kills a person before they've had children, and neither does the slow-growing skin cancer that pale skin is prone to. Natural selection is ruthlessly indifferent to suffering that doesn't reduce reproduction. A trait that only starts causing problems at age 50 has essentially no evolutionary weight. So if it wasn't sunburn driving the color of ancient human skin, something else with a direct line to survival and fertility had to be doing the work. That's the second layer of the reveal, and it comes down to a single vitamin most people have never thought about twice: folate. Folate is essential for cell division and for repairing DNA, and it's especially critical during early pregnancy when it prevents catastrophic birth defects. And folate has one major weakness: ultraviolet radiation breaks it down in the bloodstream, degrading it as it circulates through the tiny blood vessels just beneath the skin's surface. Jablonski and Chaplin's research, published in the Journal of Human Evolution in 2000, proposed that this, not sunburn, not cancer, was the real evolutionary pressure. Populations near the equator, exposed to intense year-round UV radiation, evolved heavy concentrations of eumelanin, the dark pigment that acts as a built-in radiation shield, precisely to keep folate intact long enough for pregnancies to succeed. But that only explains half the map. Chapter 3 explains the opposite problem, thousands of miles away. As human populations began migrating north out of Africa, tens of thousands of years ago, into regions with far less annual sunlight, they ran into the inverse crisis. The body needs UV radiation to synthesize vitamin D in the skin, and vitamin D is essential for absorbing calcium and building strong bones. Too little UV exposure, especially in a low sunlight climate like northern Europe, and populations risked rickets and skeletal deformity. So the same dark pigment that had been essential protection at the equator became a liability at high latitudes, blocking too much of the UV needed to make vitamin D. Populations in these regions evolved lighter skin over generations, allowing more UV to penetrate. Jablonski and Chaplin describe this as two opposing evolutionary pressures stretched across the entire globe. One selecting for maximum protection near the equator, one selecting for maximum absorption near the poles, with the folate versus vitamin D trade-off sitting at the center of both. So, the real story isn't sunscreen at all. It's a several 100,000-year-old chemistry problem, playing out differently depending on where on Earth a person's ancestors happen to end up. Here's the part that makes this stranger still. Chapter 4 is the twist inside the twist. Sunburn wasn't irrelevant to ancient humans because they were somehow immune to it. It was irrelevant because it happened on a timescale evolution doesn't care about. A pale-skinned forager who wandered too far into equatorial sun might genuinely suffer. But that suffering had almost no bearing on whether their genes made it to the next generation. Meanwhile, a folate deficiency during pregnancy could end that lineage on the spot. Evolution isn't optimizing for comfort. It's optimizing for whichever failure happens fastest and costs the most. Sunburn lost that competition badly, which raises an uncomfortable modern footnote. Melanoma, the deadliest form of skin cancer, is different from ordinary sun damage. It's aggressive, it can strike relatively young people, and unlike a slow-burning risk accumulated over a lifetime, it doesn't fit neatly into the evolutionary story either. It's rare enough and modern enough in its current global patterns that it likely never exerted meaningful pressure on ancient population-level skin color at all. Every stripe of human skin color alive today, from the deep concentrated eumelanin common near the equator to the pale, UV-absorbing skin common in northern Europe, is a living record of that ancient tug-of-war between two vitamins and one unforgiving sun, not a record of who tanned well and who burned. The skin covering the body right now finished a negotiation that started roughly 2 million years ago on a hot grassland in East Africa between a molecule needed for pregnancy and a molecule needed for bone, and sunburn, the thing modern life treats as the whole point of skin color, was never really part of the negotiation at all.